The cuffs bit into his wrists tighter with every step he took, his sneakers scraping against the cracked pavement. Blood trickled down his forehead where the officer had shoved him into the patrol car. Neighbors stared from behind curtains, some filming, some shaking their heads. Another one, someone whispered. He wasn't resisting. He wasn't even talking. And yet the officer's voice rang out, loud and hateful, drowning out every protest. "We know what your kind is up to." But they didn't know. They had no idea who they had just arrested. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. The sun was already dipping low over Camden Street as Elijah Carter stepped out of the small corner store, a grocery bag tucked under one arm. He lived 3 blocks away, in a red brick apartment he shared with his younger sister. He had just finished a long shift at the Department of Justice downtown, but here, on this cracked sidewalk, he was just another young black man walking alone at dusk. As he turned the corner, a police cruiser slowed to a crawl beside him. Elijah didn't look. He didn't have to. He knew the sound, knew the weight of that gaze. "Hey," a voice barked from the open window. "Come here a sec." Elijah stiffened but turned, keeping his hands visible, the bag hanging low by his side. The officer who stepped out was stocky, red-faced, with a smirk that said he'd already decided what kind of man he was dealing with. "What's in the bag?" he asked, stepping too close, hand resting on the grip of his holstered weapon. Elijah kept his voice calm. "Groceries, sir. I just came from the store." "Yeah? Show me." Without waiting for permission, the officer snatched the bag from Elijah's hand, rifling through it roughly. Apples, bread, a carton of eggs spilled onto the sidewalk, some cracking on impact. Elijah fought the surge of anger rising in his chest. Another officer, taller and younger, stepped out of the cruiser and approached, his hand already slipping the cuffs from his belt. "Turn around," the first officer said sharply. "I haven't done anything," Elijah said, barely above a whisper. "Loitering. Resisting questioning. Suspicious behavior," the officer rattled off mechanically. Elijah glanced around. A woman paused on her porch across the street, her hand frozen in midair as she watered a potted plant. A young boy stopped pedaling his bike, watching wide-eyed. He could argue. He could explain. Or he could survive the next 5 minutes. Slowly, he turned around. The cuffs clamped down hard. "We know what you people are up to," the first officer hissed as he shoved Elijah toward the cruiser. Elijah stumbled but caught himself. He said nothing. The door of the cruiser opened. The seat smelled of old sweat and plastic. He sat down, the door slamming shut beside him. The officers didn't read him his rights. They didn't ask his name. They didn't know the mistake they were making, not yet. As the engine rumbled to life, Elijah stared out the window, his reflection fractured and ghost-like against the night. He wasn't thinking about the humiliation or the fear. He was already calculating. Because Elijah Carter wasn't just another black man in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was an undercover internal affairs investigator. And tomorrow morning, the men who arrested him would wake up to find their entire world collapsing, piece by piece. But tonight, he let them believe they had won. For now. The fluorescent lights of the precinct flickered overhead as Elijah was led inside, his wrists still cuffed behind him. The desk sergeant barely looked up as the arresting officer, name tag reading Wilcox, pushed the paperwork forward. "Caught him acting suspicious," Wilcox muttered. "Loitering, resisting." The sergeant, an older man with sunken eyes, frowned slightly as he took in Elijah's calm posture and spotless clothes. But he said nothing. That was the code. Don't question another officer's gut. Elijah didn't speak. He was watching everything, the cameras on the ceiling, the placement of doors, the names on the wall. He had been here before, but not in cuffs. 2 months ago, he stood in this very room under a different name, inspecting misconduct files under a federal seal. Now he was a suspect, scribbled into a flimsy arrest report by 2 patrol officers too proud to pause. "You'll hold him?" Wilcox asked. "Overnight," the sergeant confirmed. "Paperwork's thin, but the captain's out. No one's going to clear anything before morning." Elijah was led down a corridor, past holding cells reeking of bleach and bitterness. Officer Wilcox opened the last door on the left. "Welcome home," he muttered with a smirk. The cell door shut with a clang. Inside, Elijah sat on the bench, his back to the wall. His pulse was steady, but his mind was moving fast. They hadn't run his ID. Not yet. Which meant he still had time. Not to escape. To let them bury themselves deeper. Because this wasn't just misconduct. It was systemic rot, the kind internal affairs rarely got to see firsthand. But now Elijah had it all. The arrest. The bruises. The falsified charges. And the clock had just started ticking. Hours passed. At 3:47 a.m., Officer Wilcox walked past the cell and banged the bars with his baton. Up. You got company. Elijah didn't move. The door opened, and Wilcox gestured for him to step out. You said nothing all night. Bet your tune's about to change. He led Elijah down the hall, past locked doors and sleepy-eyed officers. In the interrogation room, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A second officer, this one unfamiliar, sat waiting. He looked younger, eager, dangerous. Have a seat, the new officer said, smiling without warmth. I'm Officer Deeks. Let's talk. Elijah sat, said nothing. Look, man, Deeks began, leaning forward. We got you in a bad spot. You can make this easy. Tell us what you were really doing out there. Elijah's gaze stayed flat. I bought groceries. Deeks chuckled. Sure you did. And my grandmother's a Navy SEAL. He opened a folder. It was empty. You got no priors. No ID. You're not in any system. That's funny, right? Wilcox folded his arms. Maybe he gave us a fake name. Elijah tilted his head. Or maybe I gave you everything you needed. And you didn't check. The silence thickened. Then Elijah leaned forward, his voice finally cutting through the air. Call your captain. Why? Wilcox snapped. Because if you don't, the next call will be from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Deeks blinked. What are you talking about? Elijah held his gaze. My name is Elijah Carter. Badge 73,872. DOJ Internal Affairs. Wilcox took a step back. That's a lie. Elijah reached into his memory, not for drama, not for effect, but for precision. Your precinct is under open federal review for misconduct allegations. My supervisor signed the warrant 3 days ago. I was observing field behavior. Until you arrested me. Deeks looked pale. Wilcox's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Elijah leaned back. Don't bother calling a lawyer. He glanced at the mirrored wall behind them. They're already watching. Captain Laura Prescott didn't usually answer her phone at 4 a.m. But when dispatch said a man in holding claimed to be DOJ Internal Affairs, she was out of bed before the line disconnected. By 4:17, she was inside the precinct, hair pulled into a bun, uniform sharp, eyes sharper. She found Officers Wilcox and Deeks in the hallway, pale and restless. Where is he? She asked curtly. Interrogation 2, Wilcox muttered. He claims he's some kind of federal agent. Claims? She snapped. Did either of you run his name? Deeks hesitated. We were about to. Prescott pushed past them. Inside the room, Elijah sat with perfect posture, hands folded on the table. He didn't stand. He didn't smile. Prescott shut the door behind her. I'm Captain Prescott. Who exactly are you? Elijah met her eyes. Agent Elijah Carter. Internal Affairs. DOJ. Badge 73,872. He said it like a warning, like a countdown. Prescott didn't blink. Identification? Taken during booking, along with my phone, and my voice recorder. Prescott turned toward the mirror. A beat passed. The door opened again. A plainclothes man in a gray windbreaker entered silently, a leather folder in hand. Prescott took it, flipped it open, and froze. DOJ seal. Internal Affairs. Authorization forms. Elijah's photograph. Everything real. She looked at Elijah again. This time, differently. You were embedded? Observing. Field surveillance. But now, he looked toward the mirror. Now it's become a case. Prescott clenched her jaw. Why this precinct? 34 excessive force reports. 17 dismissal recommendations buried. 3 suicides in holding. All in the last 9 months. Prescott didn't deny it. She sat down slowly across from him. What happened out there? I walked home. Bought groceries. That's all. But I didn't look scared. I didn't look poor. I looked like someone who might ask questions. So they put me in cuffs. Prescott rubbed her forehead. And you said nothing? They never asked. Just assumed. Officer Wilcox? Initiated contact. Searched me without cause. Filed a false report. Officer Deeks? Joined later. Used threats. Interrogated without legal basis. Prescott closed the folder. You realize this is going to explode. Elijah's voice dropped. I'm counting on it. Silence stretched. Then Prescott stood. I want this cleaned up. Now. I'll handle the fallout. No. Elijah said firmly. You'll document it. Every word. Every second. I'm not walking out that door until there's accountability. On paper. Prescott's eyes narrowed. You're not just here to observe. Elijah nodded once. I'm here to end it. Outside the room, Wilcox paced nervously. Deeks leaned against the wall, sweat glistening at his temple. Prescott opened the door and stepped out, folder still in hand. "You too. My office. Now." Wilcox stammered. "Captain, we didn't. Not a word. You have no idea who you just put in a cell." And with that, the cracks in their armor began to widen. By 6 a.m., word had begun to spread through the precinct, not officially, not on paper, but through whispers, glances, and shifting postures. Elijah Carter, the man they cuffed and processed like a suspect, was not just somebody. He was the man watching all of them. Down in the records room, Officer Linda Cho sat stiff-backed at her computer. Her supervisor leaned over her shoulder. "Pull everything related to yesterday's arrests," he ordered. "Any contact Wilcox or Deeks had after 1,700 hours. Body cam files. Radio logs. Street camera footage if it's archived." Linda nodded, but her hand paused over the keyboard. She'd seen things, quiet things. Reports that didn't match videos. Detainees who never made it past intake. But like everyone else, she kept her head down. Until now. In Captain Prescott's office, the walls felt tighter than usual. Wilcox sat slumped in one chair, eyes on the floor. Deeks sat ramrod straight, trying too hard to look composed. Prescott stood behind her desk, hands on her hips, folder still unopened before her. "This is no longer a disciplinary matter," she said coldly. "This is a federal investigation. And the two of you may have just made yourselves Exhibit A." "We didn't know who he was," Deeks muttered. "That's exactly the point," she snapped. "You thought he was just another black man walking home with groceries. And your instinct was to cuff him." Wilcox's voice cracked. "He was watching us. Spying. Monitoring," Prescott corrected. "Legally. Under full authorization. You didn't ask questions because you didn't want answers. You wanted control." The silence grew suffocating. Finally, Deeks said what neither wanted to admit. "What happens now?" Prescott tapped the folder. "Internal Affairs has full jurisdiction. They'll be reviewing your personnel files, body cam footage, if you didn't shut it off, and every report you've filed in the last year." Wilcox's face turned gray. "If I cooperate." "Cooperate?" She cut in. "That's not a favor. That's your only option. You too embarrassed this department. And worse, you confirmed everything they were already suspicious of." Outside, Elijah waited. Still cuffed, though only for optics. A federal observer had joined him, quiet, dressed in black, carrying a small recording tablet. "You want us to proceed?" the agent asked. Elijah nodded. "Full chain of command. No names off the table." "Including Prescott?" Elijah paused. "That depends. If she acts fast, maybe she walks out clean. But if she shields them..." He didn't finish the sentence. The hallway phone rang. Down the corridor, a patrol officer picked up, listened, then turned pale. "DOJ Field Chief just arrived," he whispered. By 6:42, 3 black sedans pulled into the lot. Unmarked, but unmistakable. Inside the interrogation room, Elijah stood. His cuffs were finally removed. The observer handed him a pen and a thick file, the first page marked Preliminary Misconduct Trigger, Camden Precinct. He signed his name cleanly, deliberately. Elijah Carter, federal agent. The time for silence had ended. Now came the reckoning. At 7:05 a.m., the conference room on the second floor of Camden Precinct transformed. Not with sound, with presence. 3 agents from the DOJ's Office of Professional Responsibility entered silently. No introductions. Just badges, files, and the kind of silence that meant, "Nothing you say will save you now." Captain Prescott sat at the head of the table. Elijah stood at the far end, arms folded, back straight. The lead agent, a tall woman in a navy blazer, opened her folder and began. "We're initiating preliminary action based on field contact and internal irregularities flagged by Agent Carter. This precinct is now under audit. All personnel are subject to review. Starting with command staff." Prescott's throat tightened. She'd known this moment might come. But not like this. Not this sudden. Not this public. Agent Carter has filed an internal trigger report. Filed under targeted misconduct during lawful civilian behavior, the agent continued. That category requires immediate response. Elijah stepped forward, placing a second file on the table. It was slimmer, sharper. "This is a list of officers whose names appear repeatedly across misconduct reports. Wilcox, Deeks, Monroe, Garza, and 4 unnamed officers who were never identified in statements." The DOJ agents flipped through it without comment. Prescott tried to speak. If I may, I've already initiated corrective. That won't be necessary, the agent cut in. You're relieved of oversight for this review. Until the audit is concluded. The room fell silent. Prescott blinked. Her voice, when it returned, was cold steel. Are you replacing me? Not yet, the agent replied. But you're no longer leading this. Effective immediately. Wilcox and Deeks stood outside in the hallway, watching the conference room through the glass. Wilcox leaned close. They're going to bury us. Deeks shook his head. Not if we bury Carter first. Wilcox turned. What do you mean? We dig. He's not perfect. Nobody is. We find something, anything. He's been in the field for 6 months. Maybe he overstepped. Maybe he didn't report something. Maybe someone files a counterclaim. Wilcox stared at him. That's the play? It's the only one we have. Downstairs, Elijah stepped into an empty office with the senior agent from DOJ. How bad is it? She asked. Worse than I expected, he said. There's complicity at every level. Cover-ups, lost footage, witness intimidation. And it's not just Camden. The Rock connects to 2 neighboring districts. The agent nodded. Then we expand scope. But you're a liability now, Elijah. They know who you are. You'll be targeted. He didn't flinch. Let them try. Because he wasn't done. Not even close. By 9 a.m., Elijah's face was no longer anonymous. His name was whispered at water coolers, typed in group chats, printed on an unmarked sheet pinned to the back wall of the locker room. Elijah Carter, DOJ Internal Affairs. Do not engage without authorization. But some officers didn't wait for permission. In a narrow office 3 floors above the holding cells, Sergeant Nolan Monroe sat hunched over a laptop. Beside him, Deeks paced like a caged animal. You really think this is going to work? Monroe muttered. It's already working, Deeks hissed. I called in a favor from a guy in records. We're pulling his old field logs from Ohio. From when? 2 years ago. Allegation of entrapment in a housing task force. Got dismissed, but if we leak it out of context, we can make it look like a pattern. Monroe scowled. DOJ's not stupid. They'll vet it. Deeks stopped pacing. It's not about DOJ. It's about perception. If the press gets it, if the local paper prints Elijah Carter involved in covert housing sting, they don't care about details. They just see the headline. Monroe leaned back, rubbing his jaw. So we smear him before he dismantles us. Exactly. By 10:15 a.m., the file was sent, anonymously, to 2 city council members, a blog reporter, and a local cop-run Facebook page known for pro-police commentary. 10 minutes later, it was live. Feds plant undercover agent with shady past inside Camden PD. When Elijah saw it, he was reviewing body cam footage in the DOJ operations trailer parked outside the precinct. The agent beside him looked up from her tablet. You see this? Elijah didn't respond immediately. Then he nodded. I expected worse. Do you want us to issue a counterstatement? Elijah shook his head. Not yet. He picked up the tablet, tapped the screen, and opened one of the flag videos, the one from Wilcox's belt cam. Timestamp, 1843. Location, Riverside Corner Store. He watched silently as the video played. Wilcox approaching, aggressive posture, no call for backup, no verbal ID request. Just a shove, a cuff, and a muttered. Another one. Elijah paused the clip. We'll respond with truth. Not spin. But truth wasn't fast enough. At noon, Captain Prescott's phone buzzed. It was her division commander. I've seen the footage, Laura. But this press leak? They're calling into question the investigator now. And the officers? She asked coldly. Doesn't matter if the public stops trusting the probe. Control the optics, or we'll have to close the file. Prescott hung up, face hardening. She walked into the operations room, eyes locking with Elijah's. We have a problem. The department's pulling away. Elijah nodded. Let them. You don't understand. They'll spin this until... No, he interrupted. They won't. Because we're not negotiating. Not anymore. He slid a document across the table. Prescott picked it up. Her face paled. You filed an escalation? This morning. Direct to the U.S. Attorney's Office. She stared at him. That puts all of us under federal heat. Good, Elijah said. Because that's where the lies start to melt. At 1:45 p.m., the precinct's side door opened quietly. Officer Brian Garza stepped into the alley behind the station, phone pressed tight to his ear. They're turning on each other, he whispered. Wilcox is spiraling. Deeks is hiding in the locker room. The voice on the other end was low, clipped. What about the captain? She's still playing both sides. But Carter, he's the problem. He doesn't flinch. There was a pause. We gave you time. We warned your unit. Garza swallowed hard. What do you want me to do? Slow the leak. Discredit the files. And make sure Carter walks away. Garza looked over his shoulder. And if he doesn't? The line went dead. Inside the precinct, Elijah sat with Agent Moreno, reviewing another batch of body cam files. This one was worse. A 17-year-old shoved against a patrol car. No resistance. No threat. Just skin color. The officer's report claimed aggressive posturing. Elijah's jaw tightened. That's the third Ms. report this week alone, Moreno muttered. Elijah nodded, eyes never leaving the screen. It's not incompetence. It's intentional. Across the hall, the suspension board filled up fast. Officer Travis Deeks, placed on administrative leave. Sergeant Nolan Monroe, suspended pending investigation. Officer Wilcox, reassigned without weapon access. And yet, the rot ran deeper. Elijah knew it. He could feel it in the quiet, in the eyes that refused to meet his, in the missing emails, in the calls not logged in dispatch. That afternoon, Prescott confronted him in her office. This thing is burning, Elijah. People are shutting down. No one will talk. And now I'm getting anonymous complaints about you, alleging you're abusing your authority. Elijah stood still. From who? No names. Just noise. But it's coordinated. He looked at her, voice steady. Then let them talk louder. I have nothing to hide. Prescott paused, then lowered her voice. Do you know what they're afraid of? Me? No. That this doesn't stop with Camden. That when you're done here, the next city falls. And the next. Elijah nodded. It will. That night, around 9 p.m., a file landed in his inbox from an encrypted DOJ relay. Subject: Backchannel Communications, Internal Risk. Attached: a call log. Origin: Camden Precinct. Destination: private number registered to a retired deputy chief. Date: the morning after Elijah's arrest. The body of the email was just one sentence. Your precinct isn't just dirty. It's protected. Elijah closed his laptop and sat still, letting the weight settle. This wasn't just about bad cops anymore. It was about people protecting them. People outside the station. People who still had power. And now he had proof they were watching him. But so was he. By dawn, Elijah's face was everywhere, not on national news, but in a targeted smear campaign pulsing through anonymous message boards, local forums, and precinct group chats. Photos of him walking through the DOJ trailer. Out-of-context screenshots. A claim that he'd doctored footage, all fake. All designed to fracture trust. At 7:12 a.m., a printed page was slid under his motel room door. You think you're safe because you wear a badge, but you bleed like the rest of us. No signature. No trace. Just a message. Elijah picked it up calmly, folded it in half, and placed it in a file labeled Threat Documentation. He didn't call it in, because he already knew the precinct phone lines were compromised. Inside the mobile DOJ trailer, Agent Moreno was fuming. They've leaked 3 edited clips already. They cut the audio, blurred the timestamps. Elijah looked over the footage. And it's working? Not with us. But the city council is starting to back off. They want more time to evaluate. Elijah leaned back, which means they're scared. Someone's telling them the fallout won't stop with officers. Moreno hesitated. Do you think Prescott's involved? Elijah looked out the window at the precinct. No, she's not clean, but she's not crooked. She's cornered. Downstairs, Captain Prescott was dealing with her own silent war. Her command staff had gone quiet. 2 lieutenants had called in sick. 1 sergeant handed in a transfer request. The message was clear. If she backed Elijah, she stood alone. But she didn't flinch. At noon, she walked into the records division and unlocked a cabinet she hadn't opened in 5 years. Inside, sealed disciplinary logs. Files that never made it into the digital system. The kind of records only paper could bury. She placed a stack of them on Elijah's desk at 12:36 p.m. You didn't get these from me, she said. Elijah opened the top folder. Officer Garza. Excessive force. Settled quietly in 2019. Victim was 16. Witness statement. They said not to talk if I wanted to see my brother again. He closed the file slowly. There's more? Prescott nodded. It's not just about covering crimes. It's about protecting people who protect others. The ones who make cases disappear. The ones who whisper to judges. They're afraid of what you'll find when you lift the next stone. That evening, someone tried to lift the stone for him. At 6:43 p.m., Elijah returned to his motel to find his laptop missing. No sign of forced entry. No mess. Just a single folder left behind on the desk. It was titled, "Choose Your Enemies." Inside, only one thing, a USB stick. He plugged it in with gloves. Audio recordings. Phone calls. Officers talking about suspects before reports were filed. Statements like, "Make it sound like he lunged. If he doesn't run, say he did." Elijah copied everything, then snapped the stick in half. It was bait. A test. Someone wanted him to leak it wrong. To discredit himself. They were trying to shake him. But all they did was confirm something far worse. The cover-up had a conductor. Someone still untouched. And Elijah was getting closer. The next morning, Elijah stood before the Internal Review Commission at the Department of Justice Field Office in Trenton. His report, 187 pages long, lay stacked neatly beside him. At the table across from him sat 4 federal attorneys, 1 DOJ investigator, and a regional chief from Civil Rights Enforcement. All eyes were on him. "Your conclusion?" the chief asked. Elijah spoke clearly. "The Camden precinct is not a case of isolated misconduct. It is a structurally protected environment maintained by selective enforcement, paper destruction, and senior interference." He let that sit. For officers routinely falsify arrest narratives. At least 2 sergeants buried civilian complaints. Command staff failed to discipline even when evidence was overwhelming. And he paused. There is credible proof that a former deputy chief, now a political liaison for the mayor's office, coordinated interference with at least 3 internal affairs probes between 2020 and 2023. Silence. Then the civil rights chief leaned forward. "Do you have names?" Elijah slid a second folder forward. "Every one of them." That same day, at Camden City Hall, a call was placed to Captain Prescott's private line. She picked up, expecting more fallout. Instead, she heard the mayor's chief of staff. "We need you to distance yourself from Carter. The investigation's gone too far." Prescott didn't raise her voice. "Too far? We're getting pressure. From the state AG's office. If this goes public, it'll pull in people who were never meant to be touched." Prescott stared at her reflection in the window. Then they shouldn't have protected abusers. The line went dead. At 4:13 p.m., she walked into Elijah's trailer. He didn't look up. "You got the call," he said flatly. "They want me out. Will you go?" She hesitated. "Not this time." Elijah finally met her eyes. "Then prepare for blowback." And it came faster than expected. At 7 p.m., a press leak hit every local outlet. DOJ agent under scrutiny for mishandling federal documents. A false report, seeded by a City Hall source. Within 20 minutes, Elijah's badge was flagged for internal review. But by then, it was too late. Because at 6:58 p.m., 2 minutes before the leak, Elijah had already transmitted his full report to the U.S. Attorney's Office, encrypted and signed by 2 federal agents and Prescott herself. The leak didn't discredit him. It authenticated everything. The morning after, Wilcox, Deeks, Monroe, and Garza were all placed on indefinite suspension, pending federal indictment. 3 lieutenants were reassigned. 2 quietly resigned. And one named Deputy Chief Emery Salton was officially referred to the FBI. Elijah didn't celebrate. He sat alone in the trailer, watching footage of his own arrest one last time. The voice, the hand, the shove. Not because he needed to remember, but because he refused to forget. The system had cracked. Not collapsed, but fractured enough for light to break in. And for once, the ones hiding in the shadows had no control over what came next. It was raining the morning Elijah Carter returned to the Camden precinct, not as a detainee, not as a silent observer, but as the man who had cracked the wall from the inside. No press waited outside. No cameras. Just the hush that settles over a place when truth has finally landed. He stepped through the lobby, now nearly empty. The officer at the desk, new, young, rose as Elijah entered, eyes wide with recognition but filled with something else. Respect. Captain Prescott met him by the stairwell. "You sure you want to walk through here today?" she asked quietly. Elijah nodded once. "I need to see it end." They passed the empty squad room. Wilcox's desk, stripped. Deke's locker, open and cleaned out. Monroe's nameplate, gone. In the briefing room, 5 officers sat before a DOJ training rep. New policies. New oversight. New chain of command. But none of that meant change, not yet. Real change would come only if someone stayed long enough to enforce it. Elijah stepped into the interrogation room where it had started. The mirror was still cracked from where Wilcox had once slammed a chair during questioning. No one had fixed it. He looked at his own reflection, fractured but clear. Prescott joined him. DOJ offered you reassignment, didn't they? Chicago field office. Senior analyst role. Safer. Duller, Elijah said. Then turned to face her. I'm staying. She raised an eyebrow. Here? He nodded. I'm moving into oversight. Internal affairs for this region. Not undercover this time. Fully visible. Prescott gave a small smile. That's dangerous. So is silence, Elijah replied. He left the precinct a few minutes later and walked alone to the same corner where it all began. The sidewalk was wet. The street lamp flickered. And there, as if time hadn't moved, stood the grocery store. He stepped inside. The same clerk was working. Thought you vanished, the man said, recognizing him. Not quite. Elijah bought a loaf of bread and a carton of eggs, the same items from that night. The clerk bagged them, hesitating. You okay now? Elijah paused. I wasn't that night. But I am now. He stepped back outside. The rain had stopped. Across the street, a small group of teenagers huddled near the curb. One of them watched Elijah closely, tall, brown-skinned, alert. Elijah crossed toward them. Y'all good? The teens nodded. One muttered, We heard what you did. Elijah just nodded and walked on. Not a lecture. Not a warning. Just presence. That night, he filed his final internal report. It ended with a single sentence. Justice is not what you say. It's what you stand for when no one else will. Then he shut his laptop. And for the first time in months, he slept. No nightmares. No wait. Just peace. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire action and hope.